Well, welcome to episode 37 of 10-Minute Record Reviews, and this time we're going to talk about Gil Scott-Heron's really fantastic 1971 album, Pieces of a Man. This came out on Flying Dutchman in 1971, and Flying Dutchman, of course, is just an epic label when it comes to jazz funk in that era. This is not, although it says Flying Dutchman on the front, this is actually a much more recent, I think a 2014 reissue on BGP, which is one of those dodgy reissue labels. Anyway, this sounds fine, so you know what to expect. So like all Gil Scott-Heron records, this is a mixture of poetry, spoken word, singing, jazz, funk, and soul. It is unapologetically, in fact deliberately, political, socially conscious music. It's very personal, it's very direct. Growing up, he was a real disciple of what was termed in the 1960s the Black Arts Movement, which was kind of a cultural, intellectual movement creating a body of work which was derived uniquely from the African American experience. There was a guy called Amiri Baraka who founded the Black Arts Repertory Theater and School. Although Gil Scott-Heron was a little younger than all these folks and was just about to go off to university, he saw all this stuff happening around him. He went to a historically black college, Lincoln University. There he he continued to write. He wrote 2 novels. He wrote a bunch of poetry and got involved, kind of peripherally in the music scene there. When he returned to New York, he was also collaborating quite frequently with a guy called Brian Jackson, who would be his long-term collaborator and who features prominently on this and on pretty much all the albums that Gil Scott-Heron does all the way through his golden period in the 1970s and early 1980s. So again, he comes back to New York and he releases an album called Small Talk at 125th and Lenox, which is primarily a kind of spoken word album. So it's basically an album of poetry. There is some musical accompaniment. Did not really make much of a dent. I mean, it's critically well considered now, but it made very little dent culturally at the time when it came out. 1971. This album comes out and his collaboration with Jackson was really maturing. There are obviously and famously some spoken word aspects to this album, but for the most part it is a musical album, and it's widely considered a classic, both in terms of jazz funk, but also as a foundation of hip hop. So again, the first track is "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." So this is just a remarkable song. I don't think it's lost any of the power it had when it first came out. It's essentially about the sort of ruefully pointing out that and ironically and humorously at times pointing out through name checking all kinds of different things that were happening in America at the time, and particularly happening to Black Americans at the time, that white controlled sort of mainstream media was never going to pay attention to the political liberation of Black Americans, and if it did, it was not going to. It wasn't necessarily going to take their side in all this. Ron Carter plays the bass here, and I think makes a major contribution. There was a lot of furor over the song because it's probably the most explicitly political, obviously revolutionary song in the album. Gil Scott-Heron was actually kind of annoyed by this. Not by the song itself or by its message, obviously, but by the fact that the attention the song got kind of overshadowed the rest of the album, which arguably, artistically, had a whole, maybe had more to say, or certainly musically had more to say. Save the Children, which is about, kind of very much of a piece with Marvin Gaye's what's going on, thematically, and almost the feel of the song. It's got a very mellow tempo. It's about kids being born into a world of racism and war, and their loss of innocence. Third song is another song which is an absolute highlight. I think for me, I like this song perhaps the best of the entire album, which is Lady Day and John Coltrane. It's got a great little funky lick. You gotta move your body parts when you listen to it. It's lyrically, it's about the emotional power. I mean, you can't. I think it's hard to grasp this album. Well, I think it's very hard to grasp it fully unless you actually are an African American person and you live through the times that he lived, and so I don't presume to that. But I think it is hard to even get much of a grip of this album if you're not really casting your mind back to those times, the pressures black activists and intellectuals were under at the hands of the police and mainstream society, white society in general in the United States. And this is a theme which recurs again and again in this album. Almost a sense of despair at how much stamina it takes to keep on going and keep on putting one foot in front of the other. And this is a really kind of uplifting take on that, because it's basically saying, no matter how shitty things are, Billie Holiday and John Coltrane just have this otherworldly power just to lift you up. Home is Where the Hatred Is, which I take anyway as a poem about, or the lyrics basically being a poem about heroin addiction and medicating your pain and, being in a bad place as a young person. But the narrator of the song has come from, and some autobiographical aspects of this, coming from a worse one, growing up and then medicating the pain of, dealing with the trauma of your youth, through drugs. And that's, so, this is not super uplifting stuff, but it's super powerful and very emotional, very moving. Side 2 begins with Pieces of a Man, and this is an achingly beautiful, sad song, really about his father's watching his father's experience, being, having built up a family life, having gotten a good job, having created a home, and then being laid off, and watching this, and it's all based on, like the delivery of the letter to his dad, where his dad gets laid off, and then just basically describing his dad's disintegration as a person, as a father, as somebody who's actually available to his son, and it's devastating, but it is so very, it's in a sad way. It's such a beautiful song in the way that he expresses it. It's so hard, I think, to appreciate what that must have been like, to have built yourself a life and constantly live with the threat of, and the reality of, having it ripped away that way. Followed by A Sign of the Ages, which, just like the previous song, has got this great piano accompaniment by Brian Jackson, who of course is his writing partner. This song is probably the best vehicle on the whole album for Jackson's playing, and Ron Carter's bass is great on this song as well. The final song that I think is certainly worth noting here is the last track, which is this 9-minute long epic called The Prisoner, which begins with what I think are the sound of chains and this sort of bowed double bass from Ron Carter. It's got a very cool, kind of slightly discordant, I guess, intro, and it is again sort of it's Gil looking into his own soul, and and the struggles he has, essentially feeling shackled, feeling held down, feeling held back from becoming the person he wants to be, from becoming the husband or the partner he wants to be, from becoming the father to his child. Standing outside himself, looking at himself, not being available to his own child, replicating his own experience with his dad, and the paralysis that so it's really about. I take it as the prison of the paralysis of his own situation. So it's a remarkable record. It is very personal. It is very much linked to that particular time in American history and in African American history. It's and beyond the themes and the beauty of the themes and the sadness of the themes. There's also this great success of fusing poetry and rhythmic music, which he sort of tried the first time out in his first album, didn't really work out. But this time, the fusion is excellent, and it works all the way through. In doing so, not only does he create a great work of art in its own right, but he also plants the seeds for a whole new genre. The lyrics are both super intelligent, but also matched by the emotional openness. I mean, this is like just your soul, his soul, kind of open to the listener. And there's so many shades too. Like, this is not, he gets put in this pigeonhole. Well, he's a sort of political proto-rapper. There's so many more shades to what Gil Scott-Heron could do and does on this particular album. It's brilliant, it's moving, it's inspirational. 5 out of 5 from me. If you haven't listened to it, please listen to it.